What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review, and this time we're taking a look at Saw, the final chapter, the concluding chapter in the Saw saga. Now, Saw, the final chapter, pretty much ties up all the plot threads and all the loose ends from all six previous movies and tries to wrap it all up in a satisfying way. So, does this movie do that? Eh, yeah, that's what I got to say. Yeah, honestly, truthfully, I think the final chapter is kind of the worst movie out of the entire out of the entire bunch. I think Saw, the final chapter, is the most lazily directed and most lazily put together movies in this entire franchise. From a cinematography and directorial standpoint, this is the worst looking movie of the bunch. The makeup effects in this movie look like they look like toys. They don't look real at all. The other movies previous to this, they looked that they had some sort of sense of a realistic look to it. This stuff looks like complete rubber, and it's so distracting, like really distracting. Not only that, why is the blood in this movie pink? This blood has never the blood always looked pink to me when I was watching this thing. Not to mention, this thing has the look of a straight to DVD. This does not feel like a cinematic movie. This feels like it was supposed to be released on DVD. That's how fake and cheap looking it really is. So, from a production standpoint and a directing standpoint, this movie looks like garbage. From a acting standpoint, it's meh. It's just meh. From a character standpoint, it's just okay. More useless characters to throw away. This movie has a prologue with these two dudes fighting over some bitch who is pretty much using them. They kill the bitch, and then we don't see these two dudes ever again. So, what's the point of this prologue? Absolutely nothing. This movie is dividing into two separate plots. Plot number the main the main plot is pretty much Jill going to internal affairs, therefore starting the manhunt for Hoffman. She goes to this guy named Matt Gibson, who is our lead protagonist of the piece, and he's pretty much heading the manhunt to try and capture Hoffman, who is in full blown refugee mode, I guess. So that's pretty much plot A. Plot B is following this guy played by Sean Patrick Flannery, whose name I can't remember what his name was. Some guy who claimed to be a Jigsaw victim, but he completely fabricated an entire story just to make some money off of it. So eventually he gets put through a real Jigsaw test, and he fails every single test he's in. His three friends die, and his wife dies. Therefore, this to me was completely pointless. Because could this fucking guy at least say one of these people? I mean, was the whole point of it was? I mean, he didn't. What was the purpose of this? Not to mention, it feels so independent from the rest of this movie. See, this is why this movie sucks to me. The whole plot with this guy who fabricated an entire story about being a Jigsaw victim is so disconnected from the rest of the movie. It is the most forgettable part of this entire movie. Because the main movie is pretty much the hunt for Hoffman, and that's what the final chapter really should have been. It should have been the hunt for Hoffman, or Hoffman putting Jill through a series of tests in order for her to survive. I think that would make for a much more interesting movie instead of what we got, because what we got was kind of garbage. Tobin Bell, he's barely in this movie in his flashbacks, which is a shame. You know, Carrie Elwes, Dr. Gordon, he makes his return from a plot point that was hinted at in the previous movie. You know, Carrie Elwes returns. He's only in 3 scenes, and he's revealed to have been with, he's revealed to have been another apprentice since since the first movie. John Kramer Jigsaw's got so many apprentices, he can start his own Avengers team. That's how ridiculous it is. But, you know, Gordon being one of the apprentices, I can buy because, you know, when you actually look back at all the movies, it makes sense that Dr. Gordon would be on his side because you need to be a doctor in order to strategically place these certain things in the human body to where it will not kill these people, but it will definitely maim these people. So the revelation of Dr. Gordon being with John Kramer pretty much from the second movie on, it makes sense. We also see how Gordon survives. He cauterizes his wound, and then John pretty much finds him and nurses him back to health, giving him a prosthetic leg. So, yeah, let's seeing Carrie Ellis return as Dr. Gordon, great stuff. Underutilized, absolutely. Tobin Bell, underutilized, even in flashback scenes, absolutely. This entire movie being a very just meh movie, absolutely. The two plot points are just boring. The whole chase for Hoffman is not thrilling or interesting. See, it would have been much better if it was Erickson and Strom doing the chasing instead of this new character, instead of this new Gibson character who is just boring. At least with Strom and Erickson, you have a connection to them because they were introduced in previous movies. But this fucking franchise killed them off, and then you're stuck with this other guy, this filler guy who you know is gonna die, and he does die. He goes out like a cheapskate punk. He gets gunned down by a turret. If anything, the only remotely cool scene to me in this entire movie is when Hoffman is pretty much killing everybody in the internal affairs building to get to Jill. I thought that stuff was pretty cool because Hoffman was just like freaking Michael Myers or Jason, just going through everyone like a madman until he finally got to Jill. And he ultimately kills Jill too by giving her the reverse bear trap. So we actually have to see the reverse bear trap in action and what it can do, and it's gruesome. Now, of course, the killing of Jill is what leads to the revelation of Dr. Lawrence as John Kramer apprentice, because we find out the contents of the package that Jill delivered to Gordon in the previous movie, which pretty much states that if anything were to happen to Jill, then Gordon would have to take action, which is what he inevitably does. And it goes back to the first movie where he locks Hoffman up in the bathroom where he and Adam were. So I kind of like that. I'm not gonna lie. The last 5 minutes of this movie with Gordon and Hoffman, that stuff I actually do enjoy. The handful of scenes that Carrie Elwes is in makes me wonder why wasn't he in more in this movie, because that was actually making me really depressed. That that Dr. Gordon is barely in this, but Carrie Elwes is barely in this movie. This movie definitely could have used more of his presence. It probably would have been much more interesting and much more better, to be honest with you. Instead, this movie is just garbage. I don't like it at all. And honestly, truthfully, I think the final chapter is the weakest of all these Saw movies, which is why I'm gonna give it a. I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 10. That's it. That's all I got to say about Saw the final chapter. 2 out of 10. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.